Listen carefully, because what I'm about to tell you isn't the kind of thing you'll find in a school book or hear in some motivational seminar. This isn't sugar-coated inspiration. This is the kind of knowledge people have been trying to keep from you for centuries, because once you see it, once you truly understand it, you'll never be able to look at people the same way again. You'll start noticing the game behind every smile, the agenda behind every word, the hidden structure beneath every social interaction. Your father didn't teach you this because he didn't know it. Your teachers didn't dare because they were conditioned to avoid it. And most men, they'll go through their entire lives blind, stumbling through a world they don't understand, wondering why they're overlooked, ignored, and stepped on, never realizing that the rules they were taught to play by were lies. This isn't about positive thinking, or being endlessly optimistic, or pretending that life is fair. It's about stripping away the illusions that have been deliberately placed in front of you. The truth I'm giving you is raw, uncomfortable, and in many ways dangerous. It has been hidden behind curtains of morality, politeness, and religion because if men actually understood it, if men actually applied it, they would no longer be controllable. Over 500 years ago, Niccolò Machiavelli wrote a book that revealed the mechanics of power, and it was so brutally honest about human nature that the Catholic Church banned it. Leaders condemned it in public, yet studied it in secret, because they knew it contained the operating manual for influence, control, and survival. Even today, presidents, CEOs, and world leaders pretend it's unethical, but behind closed doors they devour its lessons because they know what most men don't. Power doesn't reward those who play fair, it rewards those who see clearly. You weren't meant to see clearly. From the time you were young, you were programmed to equate strength with cruelty, strategy with manipulation, and clarity with cynicism. Society told you that ignorance was virtue, that being blind to the darker truths of life somehow made you a better man. But tell me, what's virtuous about being used? What's noble about being blind? What's good about walking into traps you could have avoided if only someone had given you the map? Ignorance doesn't protect you. Ignorance makes you prey. That's why most men live quietly frustrated lives, giving their energy, their time, their loyalty to people and institutions that never return the favor. They were told that to even think strategically makes them bad. So they never learn how to protect themselves, never learn how to build influence, never learn how to command respect. They die soft, blind, and forgotten. That's not going to be you. Because once you absorb this, once you accept that human beings are not what you were told they are, you'll become something most men never get the chance to be. Dangerous. Not dangerous in the sense of reckless violence, but dangerous because you'll see reality for what it is. Dangerous because you can't be fooled by flattery, by false promises, by appearances. Dangerous because you'll stop being someone who reacts to the world and start being someone who shapes it. And that is exactly why you need to hear the first truth. Here it is. People are not rational. They never were. They are emotional creatures, driven not by logic or reason, but by desire, fear, insecurity, and impulse. The story that humans weigh their options carefully, evaluate evidence, and make the best choices for themselves is one of the greatest lies ever sold. In reality, people chase comfort, they run from pain, and they rationalize it afterwards to make themselves feel smarter than they are. This is the true algorithm, the real code that runs beneath the surface of every interaction you'll ever have. Machiavelli himself wrote, "Men judge more by the eye than by the hand. For all can see, few can feel." That line cuts through centuries, like a blade. What it means is simple. People do not judge reality by truth or substance. They judge it by appearance. They trust the surface, not the depth. And if you open your eyes, you'll see it everywhere. Think about your friend who constantly asks for advice, nods along, even agrees with everything you tell him, but then ignores it the moment he realizes it requires effort. Think about the coworker who complains about being broke, swears he wants to save, then burns half his paycheck on Starbucks every morning because it makes him feel good for 5 minutes. Think about the woman who says she wants a kind and stable man, yet keeps going back to the one who treats her like an option, because he excites her emotions in a way the safe man doesn't. Do you see the pattern? Logic doesn't guide them. Emotion does. Truth doesn't attract them. Validation does. That's why facts rarely win arguments. That's why evidence rarely changes minds. People don't want reality, they want feelings that protect their egos. And if you want influence, if you want to lead, if you want to command respect, you need to stop wasting your energy trying to argue people into clarity. It doesn't work. You can't argue someone into maturity. You can't shame them into wisdom. What you can do is make them feel. Make them feel like aligning with you gives them status, security, identity. Make them feel like being on your side is who they want to be. Most men never understand this. They drown in facts, trying to out-debate, out-explain, out-reason everyone around them, and then they're shocked when they lose influence to the man who barely speaks but knows how to stir emotion. That's why so many so-called alpha males dominate rooms without saying much. They understand that emotion is the language of persuasion, and the man who can shape what others feel will always control the room, regardless of who has the facts. That's the first shift you must make. Stop thinking the world is a game of logic, of evidence, of fairness. Stop thinking that truth will prevail just because it's truth. It won't. The man who wins is the man who understands that emotion is the battlefield and appearance is the weapon. To those still trapped in the fairy tale of fairness, this sounds manipulative, but that's only because they're still asleep. Influence isn't manipulation. It's effectiveness. It's survival. It's the difference between being heard and being ignored, between being respected and being forgotten. And if you can internalize that, if you can accept that people are creatures of emotion and learn to work with that truth instead of against it, then you've already taken your first step out of blindness and into real power. Most people believe they are free simply because they can make choices, but real freedom is not found in options, it is found in the strength to act without being enslaved by fear or validation. This is the great paradox of power. The more desperately someone clings to being accepted, the more invisible they become, and the more easily they are controlled. It is why so many men trade their authenticity for approval, slowly suffocating themselves under the weight of expectations until they no longer remember who they were before the world told them who they should be. But there is a moment, often born from pain, where a man realizes that the chains binding him were never placed there by others alone. They were fastened by his own willingness to comply, to compromise, to bend in order to be loved, accepted, or respected. And once that realization strikes, it cannot be ignored. It ignites something dangerous, something liberating, the recognition that he is under no obligation to betray himself just to belong. From that recognition comes a transformation, though it is not sudden or painless. It is a stripping away, layer by layer, of false identities that were never his to begin with. He begins to see how much of his life has been dictated by silent manipulation, the subtle disapproval of others, the unspoken threat of abandonment, the quiet pressure to conform. He sees how often he has betrayed his own instincts just to avoid rejection. But now he no longer sees rejection as a death sentence. Instead, he begins to see it as proof of authenticity. To be rejected for who you truly are is far less tragic than to be accepted for a mask you've grown to hate. And so, he stops apologizing for existing in his own truth. He learns to walk away, not out of arrogance, but out of loyalty to himself. That loyalty becomes the very essence of his strength, a kind of quiet power that cannot be stolen because it does not depend on anyone else's permission to exist. As he embraces this transformation, he also realizes the subtle irony of life. The moment he no longer needs validation, the world becomes drawn to him. Not because he begs for attention, but because independence has its own gravity. People feel it, even if they can't name it. They sense the difference between someone who seeks to be chosen and someone who is already whole. The man who is already whole carries himself differently. He does not chase, he does not plead, he does not try to convince others of his worth. He simply embodies it, and that embodiment is irresistible because it is so rare. In a world full of compromise and fear, the man who refuses to betray himself becomes a mirror, forcing others to question their own submission. This is not about dominance in the shallow sense, but about presence, the kind of presence that silences a room without demanding attention. Yet this stage is not without trials, for the world does not easily allow someone to free themselves from its grip. There will always be forces trying to pull him back, old relationships, old habits, old voices whispering that he is being selfish, cold, or unloving. But these are not truths. They are strategies of control. He learns to discern the difference between genuine connection and emotional manipulation. He begins to understand that those who truly value him will never demand that he diminish himself to fit their comfort. And in this understanding, he grows ruthless with boundaries not cruel, but uncompromising. He will give, but never at the cost of his own essence. He will love, but never in exchange for his freedom. He will serve, but never as a slave. This balance creates a paradoxical magnetism, because it is only when he is willing to lose everything that he gains the very respect and desire he was once chasing. This is the hidden secret most never discover. True power is not about control over others, but control over oneself. It is the refusal to be swayed by the illusions of fear and neediness. It is the courage to stand firm, even when standing firm means standing alone. And from that place of inner solidity, the world begins to bend in ways it never did before. Opportunities that once seemed impossible appear, relationships that once drained him fall away, and a new circle of people, drawn by his authenticity, emerges naturally. He sees that he was never meant to be endlessly available, endlessly accommodating, endlessly safe. His role was to embody truth, and truth by its nature disrupts, challenges, and awakens. That disruption is his gift, even if it costs him comfort. For comfort was the very cage he was born to escape. There comes a moment where the struggle, the tearing apart, the breaking of chains reaches its climax. It is the point where a man realizes that everything he thought was weakness was actually training. Every betrayal was a lesson, every rejection was a sharpening blade, every disappointment was a mirror, exposing the parts of him he still clung to out of fear. What once felt like punishment now reveals itself as initiation. He sees clearly that the world was never designed to hand him peace, but to challenge him into creating it within himself. And in this recognition, something irreversible happens. He stops fighting for validation, for recognition, for a seat at someone else's table, and begins building a throne of his own essence. This is not arrogance, it is clarity. The realization that he was never supposed to fit in, never supposed to delude himself, never supposed to be easily digested by a society addicted to comfort and conformity. His role was always to be the outlier, the one who disrupts the pattern simply by refusing to follow it. It is in this stage that his presence changes entirely. Where once he sought to be liked, he now seeks only to be real. Where once he sacrificed truth for harmony, he now allows harmony to collapse if it demands dishonesty. And paradoxically, the very things he once chased begin to seek him out. Respect arrives unforced, because respect is the natural byproduct of self-possession. Desire follows, not because he plays games, but because authenticity is magnetic in a way that pretense can never be. Influence grows, not because he begs for it, but because people instinctively follow those who move from conviction rather than fear. Yet he does not mistake these things for the goal. They are merely shadows cast by the light of his alignment. The real victory is internal. The unshakable peace that comes from knowing he can lose everything external and still remain whole. This unshakable peace becomes the foundation of a deeper power. For the man who is no longer controlled by fear of loss becomes untouchable. You cannot manipulate him with rejection, because he does not crave your approval. You cannot enslave him with comfort, because he does not need your shelter. You cannot seduce him with illusions, because he sees through the mask. He becomes a man who walks in the world without apology, not because he is reckless, but because he understands something most never will, that the greatest danger to a man is not failure, but forgetting himself. And because he refuses to forget, he embodies a form of rebellion more threatening than anger or violence. He is free, truly free, and freedom in its purest form is contagious. Others sense it, even if they cannot explain it. It awakens them, stirs them, unsettles them, because it exposes their own compromises. Some will resent him for it, others will try to break him for it, but a few will be inspired enough to rise alongside him. The journey, however, does not end with self-possession. It evolves into something far greater. Once he has reclaimed himself, he begins to see that his presence carries weight beyond his own survival. Every interaction becomes a ripple, every choice a signal. His refusal to betray himself gives silent permission to others to stop betraying themselves. His courage becomes a mirror in which others glimpse their own potential. And here lies the ultimate paradox. He no longer seeks to save anyone. Yet by embodying wholeness, he saves more than he ever could by sacrificing himself. His existence becomes a living challenge to the culture of weakness, fear, and manipulation. He does not preach it. He does not beg others to follow it. Radiates from him naturally. Because truth cannot be hidden once it has been lived. This is the final transformation, where the man who was once bound by fear becomes not only untouchable, but also unignorable. He stands as proof that it is possible to live without bending, without begging, without losing the core of who you are. And this proof is more powerful than any words, because it cannot be argued away. It cannot be dismissed as theory. It is real, embodied, undeniable. He becomes not a product of his environment, but the architect of his own reality. And while many will never reach this point, those who do understand that the journey was never about perfection or dominance, but about alignment. Alignment with truth, with essence, with the raw, unfiltered self that was there all along, waiting beneath the layers of conditioning. That alignment is the only real victory, because it is the only thing no one can take away.